Kobold, how do I DM for optimizers?
How many optimizers do you have in your party, Gator?
1.
Okay then, I would just recommend running the game like you normally would.
Kobold, that's not very good advice.
Well, you'll be surprised. Majority of optimizers want to experience the story with some challenges and a reasonable level of teamwork, just like any other player. That's generally what they want. You don't have to treat them differently because they optimize. As for the lone wolf optimizer or the bad optimizer that overshadows everyone, that's ridiculous because teamwork itself is part of optimization. If you don't optimize with your team in basic strategy, then you're a noob. D&D is a communication game. If you or the table itself fails to communicate properly enough times, then the game dies. Everyone loses. Optimization failed. Anyways, even with the perfect build you can imagine, where you have all your weaknesses covered, you still can't take on 8 encounters in a dungeon alone in a single adventuring day. No way. There's probably too many enemies, some of them are bulky, some of them are spellcasters, some of them even have range. Not only that, you will blow all of your resources quickly, and if you run out, you die. That's why you need a team. I said this like 2 years ago, where optimization isn't just about your build, it's about your team. It's a team game.
8 encounter days? How do you run that many encounters? Isn't that a slog?
Well, it's actually really simple to make it entertaining. Welcome to Pack Tactics, where we use dungeons in Dungeons and Dragons. It's in the name of the game. Dungeons itself is peak Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Dungeons is the easiest solution to challenge an optimizer and a party in general. It's like a gauntlet. You can easily shove a ton of different encounters in a dungeon. For example, if you DM for a level 3 party, you can have a gold mine in the mountains taken over by bandits and goblins. Unknown to these bandits and goblins, in the back of the mine there's a crypt full of treasure. That might be a different dungeon completely, or just a small room. We'll talk about that later. Easily in this dungeon alone, you can make things incredibly interesting for roleplay and combat. Maybe the bandits and goblins disbanded over the mine itself. And now, for whatever reason, both of them are 2 different factions with territories in the mines. They're not fighting or anything, but tensions are really high right now. They're in a major disagreement about what to do with the mine itself. And of course, who owns what? How do the players take advantage of that? Do the players even bother to take advantage of that? Maybe they don't want to deal with any sorts of banditry and just kill everything. That's easily like 8 or 10 encounters right there. You might say that's murder hoboing, but that's actually a very lawful aligned act. If they negotiate, it might just be 5 encounters or less. It might be easier, which is fine because roleplay should be rewarded. That's not to say that the combat option should be punished, but obviously 10 fights is harder than 5 fights. The benefits to fighting everyone is you get more loot over the roleplay option. That's what makes sense. Everybody dies, you take their stuff. But maybe you can do both. Maybe you side with one faction and then backstab them later. Maybe one of the faction wants you to do a quest for them to win over their trust before making big moves against the other faction. And that's another mini adventure right there. There's a million ways to make this dungeon interesting for combat and roleplay. Then of course you add some sort of pressure in the quest itself, like I don't know, Grandma is dying in 3 days.
Oh no, Grandma!
You need to find the specific purification crystal in the mine to save Grandma. It's in the crypts I talked about before. If you don't find it in time and deliver it to Grandma, Grandma will die. There's obviously better ways to do it. It can be like an important seer or something. Basically somebody who's really useful and important to the plots that players care about. The point I'm trying to get across is, if the only thing that's ever at stake in your adventures is literally just the players' lives, no other goals, not even treasure, then your campaign kinda sucks. I'm sorry. Running a dungeon is a skill. If you run a dungeon badly, it will feel like a slog. The encounters will also feel like a slog. There's also multiple other things it hurts as well, but it's not really relevant to this video. The thing I think people forget often is roleplay can also feel like a slog too. It's a skill.
Kobold, what do you mean by that? D&D is a role-playing game. That's the whole point. fight.
I'm not denying that. That is literally the heart of tabletop role-playing games. Roleplay. That's truly where the magic is. But I've been playing tabletop games for almost 13 years, and there was one year I was playing every single day for a year. I've played at countless tables, I can't tell you how many. But in some of those games, I had to roleplay eating breakfast of all things. I think that's really bad roleplay. It doesn't add anything to the plots. I mean, sure, things can happen, but usually nothing happens. I've even seen professional role players talk about piss in character for 10 minutes straight. It's obviously really bad roleplay. Even Critical Role has made this mistake. By the way, I love Critical Role, but I think they would agree with me that they shouldn't have done that. It's obviously bad roleplay. Those two examples is what I can think of on top of my head right now. With combat, it's the same thing. If you're fighting something pointless or the fight was already won immediately, then just end the encounter and move on. You don't have to play out the whole encounter. Even if you think the players might take a little bit of damage, it doesn't matter. Just move on. Then when you've moved on, just throw the next encounter or progress the story. This is something DMs have to do if they throw many encounters. Or just a really big encounter. If it's already won, don't play it out. Just end it. Seriously, it's okay to end the encounters early. Just move on.
But Kobold! This video is sponsored by World Anvil, where you can make massive adventures with your friends.
Correct, Gator. This tool can also help you with maps and dungeons.
You can also detail these dungeons with tons of interesting lore and magic items. World Anvil will help you along your journey.
That's also correct. They have tons of guides, videos, and a thriving community that will gladly help you out. Maybe you can create adventures with them. Cooperation is optimal, especially when learning something new. This doesn't have to be about D&D either. You can use this tool for other systems as well. Like imagine playing Stars Without Number or Starfinder with this level of detail. That would be insanely fun.
Kobold, can I be the captain and steer the ship?
That's completely fine, Gator. Less responsibility for me. I just want to shoot the guns and blow things up. I highly recommend checking out World Anvil. It's a fantastic tool with a great community. Use the code PACK at the checkout and you'll get a 40% off any yearly subscription. Back to the video.
Kobold, I don't fully understand. What does all of this have to do with DMing for optimizers?
Well, you asked me about 8 encounter days, and this is related to DMing for optimizers. What they want is a proper story with a challenge. This is a challenge. What I went through is more than enough to make any sort of table happy, including optimizers, because you're using 5e's strength to your advantage. There's enough roleplay, creativity, solutions, tensions, pressure, and combat in the adventure I made on the spot. You don't have to homebrew monsters or anything, but you can if you want to. What I was thinking of was having lots of goblins, hobgoblins, bugbears, and different sorts of bandits to make it feel like an actual living mining operation. Sometimes I like to pretend that a dungeon is like a little town. A really good example of that is in Baldur's Gate 3, you know the goblin camp? That is an actual dungeon. But that dungeon doesn't actually feel like a dungeon. It feels like a town. It's really well designed. I truly believe if you can capture that magic every time, then you're gonna have some really good games. But anyways, back to this. You can also have other factions involved, like the Santharin, for example. Maybe the goblins captured somebody from the Emerald Enclave. Like, there's a lot of things you could come up with. There's also no way a single optimizer can ruin this unless they grief the party somehow. And if they do, then they're obviously suboptimal. They're going against the party, obviously. And lastly, have treasure and magic items in the dungeon. That's very important. That's basic game design. Rewards drive the players. Baldur's Gate 3 knew this very well, but obviously you don't need to go that extreme. I think they gave too much. But even if it's too much like they did, it doesn't matter. It clearly works.
Kobold, what about balancing combat?
that. That can be an entirely different video. I have my own method, but I don't use it very often because I don't need to. So long as I know what the players are playing and what their playstyles are, it's really easy to figure out how much they can handle. How you would figure out their playstyle is you run a dungeon normally, like how a module would, for example. You then take notes on when they spend resources, if they go into melee, how much HP they take in total through the whole crawl, how they set up their control spells, how they treat terrain like doorways and funnels and hallways and what have you. You're basically collecting a bunch of data from your players, and then you act from there. When I don't know the players very well, I like to throw a bunch of hard encounters back to back, just to see like what happens. If they take barely any damage, well then I'll throw deadly encounters. And if that goes well, I'll make them 2 times as deadly. And then I just slowly increase the difficulty. If they're clearly struggling, then I'm not going to increase the difficulty. It's very simple, it's like baby steps. But if it's an optimized party where mostly everyone knows what they're doing, especially with control spells and terrain, then at mid-tier 2, they can probably handle 27 times deadly encounters. I think the deadliest I've done with a group is 31. I've heard other tables do more than that, and I do actually believe them because I've done 31. I can totally picture scenarios where you could do more.
Wait, what? Kobold, there's no way! That's impossible! How do you survive?
If the party's playing like a SWAT team where they barely take any damage, then you can go to these extreme ranges, where balance doesn't matter. You can throw whatever you want, including a horde of minions. People have been playing like this since Xanathar days, probably even earlier, but I wasn't around back then. First time I heard about it was Ronan's group.
Kobold, I can't run encounters like that! That's too much for me!
Yeah, I think majority of optimized groups will agree with you. And that's why I say, hey, if you know that the battle is won, just skip the encounter. You don't need to play out the cleanup. The players can just narrate what happens in the cleanup. Now, let me be 100% clear. If you run with a really good party like that, I don't advise you run encounters like that. It's actually really bad for the game, and it's really bad for your players. But there is sort of a good news here. It can be fun when you run it correctly, and the players will feel really powerful if they survive. Working like a SWAT team like that is super rewarding, and that opens up a lot of windows for you as a DM. You can experiment. You can throw encounters you think might be interesting just to see what happens. That also means you can focus more on the story and running dungeons rather than focusing on balancing individual encounters. Cause the thing is, like, balance is already out the window. They just took on 31 times deadly. That's why I said at the very beginning, just run the game normally. Story is really what makes tabletop magical, especially when it's personal. That should be your main focus even with an optimized party. That's why they're optimized to begin with. They want to survive and see the good ending. You have a bigger chance of doing that if you're useful to the party. Anyways, party destroys this encounter in the first move by setting up a combo. Good, at least they spent a resource or multiple resources. I can't do much, so we end the fight and go to the next encounter. Party clears out the dungeon. Good, the story progresses. Players are rewarded with treasures too. Players ask for harder difficulty. Well, just add more monsters then. After years of playing D&D 5e at countless tables, I've concluded that dungeons are the solution to majority of people's problems. Just run the game normally and add dungeons to them. If you make the dungeons interesting with all kinds of different solutions, then that will make combat interesting. I've also concluded to DM with as much transparency as I possibly can. Show all the dice rolls and show enemy hit points on the screen for the players to see. Now, you don't have to be that transparent, but I've decided to do this because I've played at many tables that actually do this. Even Baldur's Gate 3 does the same thing, and I've had very positive experience with all of this, especially at tables. I hope you find this video helpful and motivating. I've DM'd for Tabletop Builds members, and of course they bring out these rockstar builds with good combat strategy. Something like that can be intimidating, but if the players like you, which is most likely the case, I hope, you're playing D&D with friends, aren't you? They will most likely tell you their problems, and maybe even bring up a solution. Maybe they DM for optimizers themselves and have really good advice. It's a team game. You're part of the team. Learn from them. End the video.
Now for the Christmas special! Kobold, it's Christmas time!
Correct. Merry Christmas, Gator. Guys, we're opening a single present from each other for this special. Well, Gator technically gets two, but anyways. Are you ready, Gator?
Yeah!
Alright, let's open it now. Holy crap, Gator. I actually wanted this. So you want to be a Game Master by Justin Alexander. That's awesome. Thank you very much, Gator. I think I'll read this tonight, actually.
I knew you would love it. By the way, thank you for the Goodberry shirt. Guys, you can get that from the Pack Tactics store. Link in the description.
As an extra gift, I bought you D&D Minecraft. I couldn't put that in the present.
Kobold, I love Minecraft. Thank you.
Well, that's it. Thank you very much for watching this video, everyone. I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.